Hi everyone, Sam here. Declan Costello is an ENT consultant and the lead scientist in the government-sponsored research into COVID-19 and singing. You're about to see a conversation I had with Declan earlier today, in which he shares some insights into the research that he's been conducting. The results of this research are going to inform government policy on live performance and singing and choirs over the coming months. If you'd like to speak up for the plight of freelance workers in the performing arts, and you find this video useful, then please join our campaign, onevoicecampaign.org, and help us speak with an ever louder one voice to ensure that freelancers are not left behind.
Yeah, good.
Are you researching today or are you doing clinical work?
No, today's clinical work, I'm on call. The lab work finished, this phase of the lab work finished last week. We are in the process of collecting and collating the data and then writing a paper about it, yeah.
Declan Costello, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. Could you just tell us who you are and what you did in the world before COVID-19?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Declan Costello. I am an ear, nose and throat surgeon and I specialise in voice disorders, so I'm a laryngologist. Going back into the mists of the past years, I actually studied music before I studied medicine. So I did a 3-year music degree and I was a choral scholar while I did that. And that was at St John's College, Cambridge, which was a lovely way to spend 3 years. Halfway through my music degree, decided I wanted to study medicine. So finished off the music, started from scratch in medicine, did 5 years at Imperial doing that, and then spent after that, you spend a few years as a junior doctor, but actually about 10 years as a junior doctor in total. And I became a consultant in 2010.
Right.
And I've been doing all sorts of different things ever since.
Fantastic. And so since COVID struck, I know that you've been doing incredibly important research for anyone with an interest in the performing arts. Can you tell us a little bit about what your research has involved and what you've been trying to find out?
Yeah, so I mean, the background to this is that at the outset of the COVID pandemic, there were clusters of coronavirus that appeared to be centered around choirs, and choirs were therefore singled out as being dangerous, quote unquote, activities, and they were fairly rapidly locked down and people were told that they weren't allowed to perform. And a follow-on from that was that people assumed that wind instruments were also similarly dangerous. So wind and brass instruments were also put under the spotlight. It's been quite difficult to change this narrative that singing is dangerous. And I've spent a bit of time over the last few weeks trying to explain to government and to anybody else who'll listen that actually singing is not intuitively any different from speaking or shouting or anything else. It's the same mechanism, it's manipulation of the vocal tract. You just do it in a slightly different way to produce notes, but there is no fundamental difference in what you're doing in one situation versus the other. It's still vibrations of the vocal folds and producing sound. Nonetheless, singing had been singled out as this sort of supposedly dangerous activity, and the research that we've been doing has been focusing on the amount of aerosol and droplet that is generated by singers when they are doing what they do, and by wind and brass instrumentalists as well.
Are aerosol and droplets, the two things you just mentioned, are they the same thing?
No, so they are different things. Now, aerosol is the stuff that comes out of your mouth or out of your instrument that is the particles are so small that they hang around in the air and then they sort of drift wherever they go. Whereas droplets come out of your mouth and they fall in front of you 1 meter or 2 onto the ground. And it's the droplet thing that is the basis of the social distancing of 1 to 2 meters. Whereas aerosol, because it hangs around in the air, you then have to actually ventilate that stuff away to get rid of it. So there's quite a fundamental difference between the two, and we've been looking at both.
Right. I know that lots of people who sing in choirs, professional and amateur, will have been thinking, how is it right that people can go back into pubs and restaurants where they may be talking quite loudly, but we're not allowed to go back to our choir? What do you think about that?
Yeah, and I think that's a very reasonable point. And the point I've made when I've spoken to people about this is, yeah, you're absolutely right. There's no, if let's say, for the sake of argument, our research demonstrates that singing is no more aerosol generating than shouting in a pub for an hour, then actually stopping people from singing doesn't seem like a particularly reasonable thing, particularly when you've got professionals, tens of thousands of professionals who at the moment, their lives, their incomes are absolutely at a standstill. And need to be got going. The government has, for its own reasons, made political decisions about what it's prepared to open up and what it has to keep locked down. And they've obviously decided that on the balance of risks of leaving the economy to flounder for another 3 months is greater than the potential risk of another outbreak of COVID. So they've opened up the bars and restaurants, and they will have, at some stage when our research comes through, they will have to make a similar decision about whether opening up singing is justified by the risks that we identify.
Do you think, from the conversations you've had with people inside the government, that they take the view that singing is just a hobby that's a nice thing to do, but people can wait? Or do they understand that there's much more to it than that in terms of, for instance, mental health and well-being?
Yeah, I think they do understand that. Clearly, there are various different people within government to try to persuade, and I think Oliver Dowd, and the Secretary of State, I think he does get it, and I think his package of 1.5 billion or whatever it was a couple of weeks ago, I think is extremely welcome. So I think there is an understanding of the importance, and he's. I know that the DCMS, the Department of Digital Culture, Media and Sport, have had a lot of correspondence from me, from choir directors, from all sorts of people outlining the importance of singing, not only economically, but culturally, spiritually, emotionally, mental health, and all the rest of it. So no, I think they do get it, and they've heard that loud and clear.
So do you think then, based on the research that you've done, and I imagine you've been looking at both professionals and amateurs, they've let professionals go back to singing sooner. Are amateurs more dangerous when it comes to singing than professionals?
Well, I mean, that's something that our research will show, because we've tested amateur singers and professional singers. One just doesn't know. I mean, I haven't looked at the finalised data, but off the top of my head, I wouldn't imagine that amateur singers are colossally more dangerous than professionals. However, there are some important differences. Amateur choirs tend to be bigger. There is the demographic of amateur choirs is sometimes a little bit older. So if you're thinking about symphony choruses and those sorts of things, those tend to be a slightly older age group. And they rehearse for longer. A professional choir might only rehearse for 3 or 6 hours beforehand, whereas an amateur choir might need a number of rehearsals in the run up to a concert. So I think there are some important differences. And the professional choirs clearly are made up of people whose earning is dependent on doing the singing. Amateur choirs, the singers themselves aren't reliant on the income, but there's a whole cohort of people around them, whether it's the orchestra, the conductor, the soloist. There's a whole lot of people who do rely on the existence of the amateur choir for their income.
Yes, indeed. The people that you've got in for your research, the singers, professional and amateur, presumably they all desperately want singing to come back. Do you think there's a danger of bias there, that they might not sing with their full power, for instance, because they want you to find in a certain way?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. And actually, no, although they might want to do that, we've thought of that. And as they're singing, we've got them to sing with a decibel meter in front of them. And we say, right, now you're going to sing to 60 decibels, 80 decibels, 100 decibels, whatever it is. So they have to aim for a certain volume.
Right, I see. Okay. The government have said that from August the 1st, performances will be allowed again indoors. Do you feel confident they'll stick to that deadline, or is there any danger that that might get pushed back in light of your researches?
Well, I mean, our research, I don't think is going to be published before the 1st of August, because there's an awful lot to do in terms of getting it out there. I think I don't know. I hadn't thought that they would put the deadline back, and I think it would be politically extremely difficult for them now, having made this big splash of audiences, are going to come back on the 1st of August. I think it would be extremely difficult for them to row back on that. So no, I think they will continue with that.
Do you think, if you were running a choir, if you were a music director, would you be preparing for another term on Zoom?
I think if I were a choir director, I would probably be leaving it just another few weeks to make my plans until this research had come out, because I think whatever it shows, I think is going to allow people to make some more informed decisions. I think it's going to be very difficult for people to make plans until they've seen what this shows, and then they can build some risk assessments around that. And of course, DCMS and PHE will then make their own decisions as to what they consider to be safe and not safe.
Yeah. At the risk of asking you to sound like the Grinch, do you think Christmas is going to be cancelled?
It's difficult to know. I mean, I think it is we're already seeing some groups going back, and I think it's very likely that some groups will be able to sing in Christmas in some form or other. Will we be seeing, 500 people in a cathedral singing Christmas carols in the congregation? Probably not, but I suspect there will be some singing around Christmas. And there are some groups, King's College, Cambridge, are on TV on Christmas Eve, and all sorts of other groups. It's critically important that they get back to it as soon as they possibly can.
Yes. On the subject of Kings, and I don't want to keep you very much longer, I know you're busy. On the subject of Kings and cathedrals, etc., do you think that they've been pushing hard enough to get, and I'm asking you really as an interested singer rather than as a doctor now, pushing hard enough to get their choirs back working and singing?
Yeah, they have, and I've been involved in those conversations with the choir directors and seeing them interacting with DCMS and pushing as well. They have been pushing. They also, I think in fairness, they have a very strong sense of duty to their choir members. They clearly want to go back to singing if they possibly can, but they only want to do that if that's safe. And I don't think they would be prepared. If you're Westminster Abbey and you compromise the health of your choir and your congregation, that's not going to look very good. And they're very keen to make sure that it's done in the right way, but also not putting the brakes on singing unnecessarily and without good reason.
Yes. Are you confident that when your research gets published and you publish your paper, that what you've discovered will tell us everything we need to know in order to make an informed decision?
Well, it's going to tell us quite a lot. I mean, there is still a lot of stuff that we're not going to know. There are issues around ventilation and how big a space you can use. Just to be absolutely clear, what this research will tell us is the amount of aerosol and droplet that's coming out of people's mouths when they're singing. Now, how that translates into, St John's Smith Square versus a theatre in the West End versus a parish church, that's a very different question. And there are further phases of research that are going to have to look at size of venues and ventilation and the number of people and that sort of thing. But this phase of research will at least give us a start on whether, for example, singing is significantly more dangerous than shouting in a pub. And I think that at least gives you a sort of starting point for where you can make some decisions.
Yes. There may be people who think, well, how come we never knew any of this before? How come this is all scientifically fresh ground?
Yeah, well, we have never encountered an airborne pandemic like this that has required us to look at it. And I think if you had tried to submit a grant 9 months ago to a research body to do this, it would have been quite tough going, because they said, well, why do we need to do this? But now there is a pressing need, and a whole area of research has opened up in terms of aerosol dispersal and aerosol spread and aerobiology and music, and all of these different things are coming together in a way they never have done before.
Yes, indeed. Declan, thank you so much for your time. It's really great to talk to you.
Not at all. Thank you for inviting me. Really much appreciated. And good luck with the singing, and keep an eye out for the results.
Can't wait to see them. Thank you so much.
All right.
All right, take care.
Take care.
Cheers. Bye-bye.